My name is Eric Marks. I'm on the MPSE Board of Directors. Firstly, a few MPSE announcements. The spring edition of our magazine, MPSE Wavelength, is in members' mailboxes and is also available online. There's lots of great content in there, so I'd highly recommend checking it out at mpse.org. At our MPSE store, you'll find lots of great stuff to get you fully equipped for the summer in our Summer Waves collection. Head to mpse.com/store to find out what clothes and items best suit your style. And on our MPSE YouTube channel, you'll find lots of great sound advice events we've already recorded in the past. Head there to see sound breakdowns with the teams who worked on Mr. Robot, Better Call Saul, and much more. Tonight, we're going to dive into the sound work from people all around the world who helped bring the Metal Gear Solid games to life. We'll be focusing on the main Metal Gear Solid games, 1 through 4, and we'll go through each of these games chronologically in order. There will be dedicated time at the end for audience questions, so please keep your questions coming in the Zoom chat, and we'll get to as many as we can later on in the event. Before we start, I think it's important to reflect on where games were the year prior to Metal Gear Solid coming out, the first game. The best-selling games of 1997 were Final Fantasy VII, Mario Kart 64, and Pocket Monsters on Game Boy. PlayStation 1 games were on CD-ROMs, where a very limited amount of game audio files could live on the game discs. Today, we take believable storytelling, cinematic experiences, evocative music, and top-tier voice acting in games for granted. The bar for this was set over and over by the Metal Gear Solid games beginning in 1998, and they continued to up the ante with each title thereafter. We're joined tonight by an unbelievably talented group of innovators who brought these games to life. I'm honored to be joined by music producer Rika Muranaka, audio director and lead cutscene sound designer Sotaro Tojima, studio manager of VO and talent services Chip Beaman, and the English voice of Solid Snake himself, David Hayter. This is actually so rare that we get to chat with the 3 main departments of sound, of the entire sound team, all in one event like this. Dialogue, music, and sound effects are actually all represented here tonight. MGS1 was a true masterpiece that immediately elevated people's expectations in games made thereafter. David, you were cast as the English voice of Solid Snake by Chris Zimmerman Salter. Had you worked with Chris prior to this game?
Yes, my very first American voiceover job was I played a small role on the show Captain Planet, the animated show in the 90s. And Chris was the casting director on that. So she was there from the very beginning of my Hollywood career.
That's amazing. What other voice acting work had you done prior to getting cast as Snake?
Well, when I lived in Japan, when I was 16, a video game company came to my high school, which was English language speaking international school, and they asked for 4 guys who spoke English to do voices for arcade games. And I don't know what those games were, but we went down to a studio and we recorded a bunch of, soldiers and people screaming and this and that. And so I like to say that I've been doing voices in video games essentially since they've had voices in video games, since it's existed. And then from then, and I really enjoyed that. And I did, I don't know, English language speaking tapes in Japan. And then I don't know if I did anything in Canada before I went to the States. But that was, but I went to the States. I did Captain Planet. I was Captain America on Spider-Man. I did a ton of anime dubbing and with Steve Blum and Bryan Cranston back when we were all poor. And yeah, I just always loved voiceover, and it just came together the way that it did, which was very gratifying.
That's incredible. What was the audition process like for you on Metal Gear Solid 1?
I went down to, there was this very weird house in Hollywood on Orange Street, and it was it had been sort of semi-converted into a sound studio and offices, and And they did casting out of there for like LA-based Japanese productions, and I had worked with them a few times. And basically what happened was they gave us the sides. The Yoji Shinkawa artwork was up on the walls. And we went out back where there was like picnic tables and stuff like that. And I went over my lines, and I just went in and went into this weird living room that had a microphone set up, and I read the thing, and that was that. And then I left, and then a few days later I was sitting, it was 1998 or 97, and I was up visiting. This is a very 90s story. I was visiting my friend Adam Duritz, who's the lead singer of Counting Crows, where they were recording their third album, and I would go visit them because they had free food. And I got a phone call from Miss Jennifer Hale, the legendary voice actress, and she said, "Guess who's going to make some money?" And I was like, "Is it me? Because that would be great, a nice change." And she said, "It is you." And she told me, Chris had let her call me to tell me that I had booked the lead in that amazing game. It changed my life.
That's incredible. So Naomi got cast before Snake in the game then?
Jennifer Hale gets cast before me no matter what. That's just who she is. I think they just write characters and then call Jennifer and say, "You're doing this, any other recommendations?" And sometimes my name comes up.
I did want to share a story. So Chris Zimmerman Salter, who was the casting and voice director of these games, unfortunately could not be here tonight, but wanted to share a story about the casting process. So originally on MGS1, Konami hired a commercial director from Torrance to be the casting director. And Chris was only going to be responsible for directing the actors, but not actually casting them. But that commercial director had no experience with voice actors, just live action on camera acting. But Chris recommended some actors based on her experience, and the team behind the game ended up approving 19 of the 20 casting recommendations that Chris had made, and ultimately got hired as the casting director over that other person.
Yeah, well, Chris knows her stuff. And sorry, Chip, I cut you off.
No, I was saying that sounds about right. Chris is just amazing.
Although she also tells a story that when I came in to read for it, I had a mullet, and I want to go on record and say that is not accurate. I've never had a mullet, and if I did, I never went out in public with it.
Not even when Snake grew one for MGS2?
No, I don't. I'm not method enough to match my haircut to the character, no.
David, your performance as this main character was essential in bringing the story to life. When you were initially planning out this character, what sorts of qualities were you hoping to embody in your performance?
Really, I just, I was young and believed in things, and I was all excited to go do, a part like this. I had always wanted to be an action hero, and I played some action heroes already. In the movie Guyver, Dark Hero, and on Spider-Man, stuff like that. And I just went in with my sort of standard action guy and did it. And I think I've never confirmed this, but I think Mr. Kojima approved me because he was a fan of the movie Guyver, Dark Hero. But it wasn't until I got the script where I found out, he starts talking. He's already Snake is already retired. He doesn't want to come back. He's already a legend. And I started to feel like this guy was older than me and had experience and was bitter and didn't want to come back. And I felt like my voice at the time, which was, pitched right around here, I sounded like sort of a cocky fighter pilot, was not appropriate. And so, as I started reading the script and I started putting more weight into the voice, more history and more fatigue, really, it started to come together. And so I came in and we were recording, and we were about 6 hours into the first day's recording when Chris said, can I play you the voice you auditioned with? And so she did, and it was completely different. And I was like, oh, geez, should we go back and re-record it? And she was like, no, I think this is working. And I felt the same way, and that's how it came together.
Did you get much feedback from Japan, the team behind the game, on your voice, or was it just kind of between you and Chris figuring that out and it would get approved?
It was just, it was just Chris, as far as I was experiencing. Chris was the director. Jeremy Blaustein, who had worked with Tojima on the translation, did some really amazing things for the English language script. Was like the producer, and we just know if there was any feedback, good or bad. I never heard it. We just sort of made what we thought was badass and fit the game, and we had some visuals to inspire us. So we just did the best we could.
Was the script for this game longer than previous projects you'd worked on, like it's significantly different in length or anything like that?
Yeah, it was about 2.5 feet tall. I mean, it was literally a stack. I got it delivered to me in a number of FedEx packages. And now bear in mind, that was the shortest script we ever did for Metal Gear. And it was, it had to have been 1,000 some odd pages. So yeah, it was to give you an idea, a standard movie script is 120 usually at the outside. So it was, yeah, it not only was it the biggest script I'd ever seen, it was practically a doorstop in terms of sheer mass.
You mentioned that location where you auditioned for the role. I've heard stories about voice acting on MGS1 was in a house and that there were multiple actors in a room together. Could you kind of talk about what that looked like for you and how it might have influenced your performance?
Yeah, it was this house, it was this living room, and we just had 4 or 5 mics lined up in a row, and we all did it together, and it was like a radio play. And all the anime stuff I'd done was just in a booth by yourself. But it's so much better to work, especially on something as cinematic as this, as dramatic as Metal Gear, to have all of the actors together really fed the scenes and made it, it was just super cool. It was like we were doing a radio play. And actually I asked for it to be, the part when I would negotiate each significant deal for Metal Gear, I always asked, I'd like us to all be in a studio together, which was unusual, but every single game we did, and Chip helped facilitate this, would be, I'd get to go in and these amazing actors would just come in and do these scenes with me, and it was incredible. And I think it really added a lot to the reality and drama and emotion of each game. It made it unique.
Rika, you also brought quite a bit of magic to this game, Metal Gear Solid 1. Prior to this game, Rika, what sorts of projects had you worked on in your career? Had you worked on any games, or what was your musical experience?
Yes, before this Metal Gear Solid, I worked on Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Silent Hill. And then I get to write song for Hideo. Hideo wasn't ready. When they hired me, they wanted to hire me for Metal Gear Solid, but he keeps saying, I'm not ready yet, so can you work with Castlevania Symphony and the Silent Hill? So that was it. So I think I had to wait about a year or so to work on the Metal Gear Solid.
When you
I think so. That's because that's what happened.
When you began work on the game on Metal Gear Solid 1, when you finally did come aboard, what were some of your initial creative conversations like with Hideo Kojima?
Well, first of all, Hideo and Yamaoka-san, and I think I want to say I can't remember third person, but I think Hideo and Yamaoka-san, we all sat down in one room, and we were trying to figure out what music, will fit into this game. And but Hideo had an idea I don't want any English language. I don't want to have French. I don't want any Spanish. I don't want a Portuguese. I don't want anything that I could recognize. I'm sitting like, what are you talking about? So I had to, I had to be linguistic or, language specialist. So I'm like, how about Gaelic? He's like, what is that? Ah, I got something he doesn't know. So I said, it's like an old Irish, language. So he's like, okay, that's it. Uh, find me something like Gaelic, song, Irish music. So okay, let's get together next week. I'll bring all those Irish music for you. So I call my record company and I asked for because they specialize in Irish music. So I got like a sample of Irish music, by hundreds of them, and I brought a whole bunch of music to this one room. And that day we all sat down and listened to Irish music. So that's what happened. So he's like, yeah, I think I like this language. I'm like, okay. And he's like, well, can it come up with the music, but not like folk music? He is so vague. He doesn't tell you, he doesn't know, but he trusts me to come up with something different. So I said, okay, I'll come up with how about Irish music and Gregorian chant. Gregorian chant. What is Gregorian chant? Like, okay, I'll just come up with it and I'll let you hear the demo. So that's what I did. So I came up with an idea, Gregorian chant and Irish music, folk music together, combine with it and take it, leave it. So that's what I did.
You mentioned
And
that
I
sort of
said,
trust that he trusted you. Was it difficult for you to build that trust, that relationship with him creatively?
I think he trusted me music wise because when I got a job, she was recording artist at that time with a record company. So that kind of automatically in Japan, it's like, oh wow, you are a recording artist. It's like you got records out. You got record by a record company. So that was a big deal for him. So that if I didn't have that, I think it was hard for someone like me come up and say something to him. But I think because of that, I think he trusted me. So at that time, it wasn't like this now because everybody wants to write music for video game company. But now it would be really difficult to get a job, to get a job at the video game company or any place. So let's say it's almost like 30 years ago, it's like nobody's doing it. Nobody was writing music for video game. So he really had to trust me on that.
Yeah.
So I got lucky.
I have to say also, Rika, the music in Metal Gear Solid 1 in particular has this deep sense of sadness and isolation. And you did an incredible job, I thought, capturing just the soul of the story, bringing that to the forefront in the music. Looking back on it now, how do you think you're able to sort of connect the music to the heart of the story in such a strong way?
Well, when he told me, I don't want a language that anybody can recognize. I don't want anybody to understand what you're saying. I don't want any language that I could say, oh, that's French, that's Spanish. I don't want that. So he mentioned that. So I had to think about it. So because of that, I had to isolate everything. I had to eliminate the language and the music that I know. Because of that, it kind of like a, you really don't have any choice but to come up with a simple music, but powerful. That's it. So, it was just, I don't know. It was just, because of, he forced me to write something that I never did it before. So that was kind of challenging. So,
On this, also on this game, Rika, how was your just process, your creative process on this game different than prior games like Silent Hill and Castlevania that you'd mentioned? How is this game a different creative workflow for you?
Okay. Well, first of all, because it's the first game ever going to PlayStation, and also they don't understand the budget, and because of them was never done music before for the video. They really didn't have a budget to go island. I had to go island to record authentic music. So at that time, I think the pound was like 148 or 50. It was ridiculous. So you had to, when he gave me the money to record the music, it was only enough for me to get a hotel room for 1 week and the airfare. That's it. And rest of it's like I had to come up with my own. So luckily, I was doing like 5 projects. I was working with the record company. I was working with I don't know. I had about 5 projects at that same time. So I utilized the money to put the money into Metal Gear Solid. So that's how I did it. And that was the only way I could, record music in Ireland because it was so expensive. It was ridiculous. But I tried to explain to him, but at that time, Metal Gear Solid didn't have the budget, and Hideo didn't prove to a company that he could make music or he could make the video game, gotta be a hit. Nobody knew. I didn't know, it's gonna be a hit. Hideo had no idea. So maybe, we were lucky, maybe we could sell overall the world, maybe 1 million. He underestimated. But first game, they sold 6 million. It's unbelievable. It shocked me. It shocked Hideo. I think it shocked everybody. All of a sudden, some 20 people to, all of a sudden it's like a 200, 300 people working on the game. It was night and day. So going to Konami, Metal Gear Solid team, become gigantic Hollywood production. It was unbelievable. So,
yeah, I mean, to that point, David, was there a moment when, after Metal Gear Solid 1 had come out where you just suddenly realized the impact you'd had on a stranger out in the world? Like where you were like, oh, this had this big of an impact?
I don't know when the first time I realized that was. I mean, to Rika's point, I knew it was going to be huge. As soon as I saw in the studio, they played for us the scene where Snake shoots down the Hind D helicopter. And it was just so, and I played video games. I'd never seen anything like it. And so, and I could tell by the writing, by the execution of it, that this was going to be, I mean, you never know for sure if it's going to be a big hit, but I was like, this is, if people really appreciate this, this is going to be massive. And I don't know. I don't remember the first time I realized the effect. I don't think it was until I started going to Comic-Cons and I started meeting people. And then I think the first time a grown man burst into tears when he realized who I was like, oh, okay, well, that had an impact. And I mean, I was literally at a bar last night up here in Oakland, and I made a joke, and I guess I did it with some sort of voice, and the guy goes, "Oh, that's great. You should be a voice actor." And I was like, "I am a voice actor." And he goes, "Oh, what's your name?" And I said, "David Hayter," and his face just went slack. And he goes, "Snake," and I was like, "That's right." And and now I'm kind of used to it. I'm sort of, but yeah, I don't remember when it started, but when it started, it was startling. I mean, But again, as a gamer, I was like, this game's going to blow people away. I could feel it.
That's incredible. Well, let's move on to Metal Gear Solid 2. This game, the sound work on this game specifically was nominated for an MPSE Golden Reel Award back in 2002 for Best Sound Editing in Computer Entertainment. Tojima-san, you came aboard the series in this title as the lead sound designer of all the cutscenes in Metal Gear Solid 2. And that was after the first E3 trailer had premiered. So before you started working and actually diving into the sound work, what were some of your early conversations like with Hideo Kojima about his expectations for your work?
Yeah, thank you, Alec. It is a funny story. So I worked for Konami Kobe, so rather than the Kojima production, so different department, the Konami. And I worked for like Game Boy game, like a smaller scale, smaller teams game. But like I had some kind of experience for kind of Game Boy or Game Boy Advanced. And I guess like Kojima production, I guess they had a plan to making a Metal Gear Solid for Game Boy Advanced. I'm not 100% sure, but like maybe that's why like they offered me to join the Hideo Kojima's project because I got some kind of early knowledge for launch title for Game Boy Advanced. And I was kind of super excited when I got an offer from Kojima Production because I watched the E3 trailer, the Metal Gear Solid 2, which was incredible with David Hayter's voices. It's super cool trailer. I was literally got a goosebumps and what a cool game. What is that, you know? So that's why I'm super excited when I get an offer from Kojima Production. And clearly my like most career was music oriented. So I was mostly composers for video game previously. That's why. So actually my expectation is wow. So I could be a music composer for Metal Gear Solid. So it's gonna be cool. So super excited. And I moved to the Kobe to Tokyo to join in the Kojima production. And in a kind of first meet, so Hideo and my boss, previous audio director, Muranaka-san, said me, hey, Sotaro, Tojima-san, please kind of working on the audio post-production for cinematics. What's the audio post-production? I didn't know anything about that. So I just kind of expected to work for music composition, but their assignment was for audio post-production for cutscenes, cinematics. So, and after a long time, like a conversation, like I finally decided to take it. So I'm not sure what is the audio post-production, but I will do my best. But please promise one thing. So it seems like this project is already, you know, kind of like end phase. And seems like I have to handle the audio post-production at this moment. So I will take it. But like after finishing this Metal Gear Solid 2 production, so please rethinking about using me as a music composer. I remember that. So I asked them to reconsider after this project. Then I took the role for Metal Gear Solid 2 production. But actually, so when I finished the Metal Gear Solid 2 production, I fell love in audio post-production, which is super amazing and fun work. And it's actually kind of similar to a music composition, kind of using a music and sound effects and the voiceover, everything, and mixing it and making it just kind of one, you know, deep music story with using all the audio elements, which was super fun to work with. So then, like I never asked them to rethink, to make me to work as a music composer since then because I loved it. But it was kind of early, the kind of first conversation I got it with Hideo Kojima and a Kojima production.
And Tojima-san, do you remember the very first cutscene you worked on and how Mr. Kojima guided you towards what he was looking for?
Yeah, I clearly remember that. So the first scene is in a Metal Gear Solid 2 in a tanker sequence. So there is a one scene in a tanker hangar bay, and an ocelot, revolver ocelot, is showing up in a small hallway. And I remember he said, like, the end of the scene, he said, so the corner will be joining you soon, comrade, after killing the one of the soldier. So it's like a really cool ocelot revealing scene. So it was pretty kind of simple sequence, but it was my kind of first sequence to work as a post-production sound editor and mixer. And so I didn't know anything about audio post-production. So I just had a Pro Tools in a like pretty kind of cheap, like soundproofing room, not audio studio. Like I just kind of wanted a little bit soundproofed room. And I tried to kind of start to make it sound like cinematic or something, So it's using a lot of libraries. I got a great music, but like a sound effects. So only I had access to a pretty generic sound library and a couple of like Metal Gear Solid unique library, and that's it. And I never used Pro Tools at all. And I tried to make it and working hard because I knew that it's very important project for Metal Gear cutscene. And worked for a couple of days. So overnight, never slept. I tried to do my best for the first my cutscene. And a couple of days after, so I feel I did it. It actually sounds pretty good. And it sounds like cinematic, so I was super excited. And seems like my first project is succeeded, and I brought Kojima to get his review, and he kind of showing the revolver ocelot scenes a couple of times in front of the Hideo, and so he just kind of keep listening repeatedly, and after he listened to it, kind of my expectation was, to be honest, hey. Sotaro, so it's actually better than I expected or something, but it was completely not. So his first question was, yeah, so he just kind of make me wait. And he said like, give me a sec. And he went back to his office, and he got back to my office with bringing the Blu-ray video of Matrix, okay. Some Matrix video. And he just start to play the Matrix video and start to compare my first project audio and one of the best sequence of Matrix audio equally compare, like just purely A/B comparison, and like repeated play the both video again and again. And just one word, he asked me, hey, Sotaro, do you think which is better? Okay, so I think it's Matrix. Okay, then please redo it. And he just left. Okay, what he's talking about. So I started to, kind of running, why Matrix sound is better than my post-production. So lots of reasons, but I tried to do whatever I could do quickly, and meeting so another like 2 nights to improve it. And again, like I got his review again, and he did exact same things, like compare Matrix audio and my audio again and again, and just one word, which is better? And I said Matrix. And so after the week of iteration, I fully realizing that. So I thought it was a joke, but it doesn't matter for him. So regardless of my experience in the area, So Kojima Hideo, his expectation and his law and his goal for Metal Gear Solid project, including cinematic audio, is world's best quality. And he literally expected for me to hit that regardless of my shallow experience. He's seriously hoping to hit that. And it was my law. I fully realizing that. It was very shocking and scary. And he also asked me, so after I'm saying like a Matrix is better, and he asked me like what's lacking to his best quality of all audio in the world, like to his Matrix quality. And I don't know, but like lots of things, kind of Matrix is made by a very historical, greatest world, greatest talented audio engineering in Hollywood. They have all like a long, deep, awesome history, so it's everything. But I guess like a starting point. So I need some kind of Hollywood knowledge experience. And he actually quickly kind of brought me a Hollywood experienced engineer who live in Japan. He's Japanese, and he paid for me anything. Like I need this equipment, this facility, this person. Like he paid everything. Like whatever I asked, he support everything. But like I feel realizing that. So it's it's regardless. It doesn't matter how much experience I had it in the field. So just kind of only important things is my responsibility. My responsibility is having the high goal bar to try to at least try to hitting the world best quality of the audio. So that's what I learned from the iteration from my first cinematic sequence. So it was very, very challenging and a very tough communication, and it was shocking first communication. But actually, even as of now, I feel this is one of the best learning opportunity for my career as an audio engineer. I feel it.
That's incredible. That's such an incredible story, and to hear that the bar was you had to reach the Matrix in your first cutscene is pretty quite a high bar.
Definitely.
Rika,
did you mention Tojima-san?
yeah.
Did you mention that they had $60 million to spend?
No, I should say that.
What?
On the sound
I should
department
say
only.
that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I missed the point, but
Okay. Fair enough. Well, amazing work. Great story.
Rika,
Yeah.
the first going back to the trailer that Tojima-san had mentioned, the very first trailer we see for Metal Gear Solid 2, I think blew everyone's socks off. This was, before the PlayStation 2 came out, there was this E3 trailer a year and a half prior to the release of Metal Gear Solid 2. And it showed off this incredible footage, built all this anticipation for what the PlayStation 2 could be, what Metal Gear Solid could look like. And the very first thing we hear in this trailer is your song, Can't Say Goodbye to Yesterday. What was your creative process like to create this beautiful song?
Okay. First of all, he didn't want to go to New York. He had other research to do in New York. And he said, let's do audition. I'm like, okay, let's find the singers in New York. First, I had an idea writing music, jazz music, composition, jazz music. But Hideo had an idea, like what kind of sound, the voice that he wanted. He wanted to sound like Meryl, not Meryl, I can't remember the Meryl. Do you remember Tojima-san?
no, exactly.
I
The
can't remember Meryl.
vocalist.
Other vocalist that he loved. old
Sorry, I
lady,
don't recall.
but he's not really good singer, but he was so into this lady's sound. It was really white lady sing jazz music. It's not black singer singing jazz, you know, but Hideo had an idea, this white old lady singing jazz music. I'm like, okay, I could find somebody like that. So we went to New York and we did audition in New York. But luckily, I had my girlfriend who lived in New York and who's a singer. And we went through a whole bunch of singers one day and still didn't like it. We auditioned so many singers and he still didn't like it. And so I gave Hideo her CD, Color White. I'm glad he used it, and because she ended up dying after the she recorded the music, and she had a cancer. And at that time, when she recorded music, she told me she had a cancer. She's trying to beat the cancer, but I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe it. So that was a almost like a my last chance, or it's her last chance to sing that song. So I presented to him. I think you're gonna like her. And he's like, okay, this is it. Let's go with her. Go with her. So we end up using Color White. And after recording the music, I came back and I guess I don't remember you were involved, but like he wanted me to uh remix some of the music. It was kind of he wanted to make it more laid back, and I think he wanted to whole entire music to speed up a little bit and vocal to match um, the phrase with the orchestra. And it's when you have everything done, it's almost impossible to do that. But I didn't say I couldn't do it, so I'm like, okay, let me work on it. I think it took me months to redo what he wanted me to do, and I did it. And he's like, okay, that's great. So I'm like, okay, that's great. Finally he said yes. And there's so many times I wanted to kill him so much, but I couldn't say, anything, but I had to work on it. And I just, I was just like determined to make it happen. So that's what happened.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear about your friend, and that somehow brings even more power to that song and just how emotional it was. I also, Rika, I wanted to talk about the overall the music in Metal Gear Solid 2. I mean, it evolved quite a bit from the first game, and your responsibilities, I think, evolved quite a bit as well. So the music during the cutscenes in Metal Gear Solid 2 were composed by Harry Gregson Williams and sounded much more like a Hollywood film.
Right.
How did Harry come aboard, and what were some of your initial conversations with him like? Had he worked any games prior to then, or what was that creative process like?
No, that was his first music composed for the video game. Um, First, he didn't want to do video game music. Well, Hideo initially wanted to ask Hans Zimmer, but he knew he couldn't get Hans Zimmer. But he's like, well, I'd be happy if I could get Harry Gregson Williams to compose music for Metal Gear Solid. I'm like, okay, let me make a phone call. Let me go and see, let me go talk to his boss. At that time, Harry Gregson Williams was working for Hans Zimmer Studio. And, in order for me to get Harry, I had to ask Hans Zimmer anyway. So I initially went to see Hans Zimmer. He actually laughed at me. He's like, you offering me how much? Because, he's used to getting the Hollywood scale. And his budget is like, I kid you not, he's doing like $8 million, $10 million for just the composing music. This is not a film budget, it's composing budget. A composer is getting that much budget for film. I'm like, okay. And that was the conversation. So he's like, no way I could do video game music for that much money. And so there's no conversation between me and Hans Zimmer at that time. So I'm like, okay, I wanted to hire Harry Gerson Williams. So, okay, he's like, well, why don't you ask Harry then? So I asked him, and I had dinner with Harry. Then I want to give a chance for you to write music for and work for Hideo. And I convinced Harry, and I was so certain he's gonna say yes. So he said yes. So I was so happy, and that's how everything started out with Harry and the music for Metal Gear.
And then like going forward, when he got started on the game, what were like the creative conversations like with him as you started kind of directing him on the music and everything?
Yeah, well, first of all, Hideo doesn't give out too many instruction, just his idea. He only have a 3 words: action, sneaky, and chasing. Those 3 sound. I had to compose 16 different patterns in the music. So sneaky, sneaky sound, like sneaky. So I had to kind of, I don't really play game at that time because I don't have the time to sit there and listen and work on a video game 16 hours a day. So I had to get the music for Hideo's team. So can you give me any kind of idea of, what the chasing scene sounds like, or what kind of sneaky sound like? And he gave me, I got an idea of it. I didn't get anything of it because they're working on it, so they couldn't really give me anything. So I'm like, he's just like, kind of like brush it off. It's like, okay. So I had to come up with my idea of sneaky sound of the video game music. So it's a process of just trying to understand what Hideo want me to give, the music. So it was like more like it was like a game it's like a head game between me and Hideo. It's like, okay, what does he want? You know what I mean? It's not like writing music. It's like trying to understand Hideo's mind. That's like 90% of his working with Hideo, try to understand his mind. Because he doesn't know what he wants until he hears it. It's a typical, so I just had to be creative, that's all. So
well, you
that's
certainly
what
did
happened.
that. Yeah, that was unbelievable music throughout that game, and just hearing how that became so cinematic in the second game compared to the first was pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
Eric, sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to go by 8:15. So I didn't know how long we were playing. I thought we were just going to do an hour, but this is amazing, all of this. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. My apologies.
Thank you, David. No problem. Yeah, I was going to jump to you next for MGS2, and yeah, the event's planned till 8:30, but yeah, you're absolutely understand, David. I understand.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
No, of course. Yeah, so jumping to you, David, for MGS2, on behalf of Metal Gear Nation, I just want to apologize for the big shell sequence of the game. No, I'm just kidding. But
not at all.
Snake had a much different role in this game. After that opening tanker section, he became something of a mentor to Raiden, and in a way to the player as well. How did you approach this sort of shift for your character?
I approached it by not knowing it was coming in any way, and then being stunned when it happened. I was like, nobody told me. We started recording. We recorded the ship sequence, the tanker sequence first, and then we sort of did it in order. And then Raiden started explaining to people what buttons to press and this and that. I'm like, hey, what are you doing my job for? And then they said, oh, no. From here on, Raiden's going to be the player and Snake's going to be like a mentor. And I was like, I see. And I was like, I feel like people will want to play Snake, but if that's your decision, whatever. So I was not prepared at all. But it was fine. It was, the game is still amazing, and I had a great time, working with Quentin and everybody else, and it wasn't really that different. I mean, it's different for the player because you're playing Raiden instead of Snake, but for me, I was just recording scenes the way I would any other way.
In your mind, David, how had Snake sort of evolved since the Shadow Moses incident, leading up to where he was standing on that George Washington Bridge?
In Metal Gear 1, he was sort of done with everything and he thought he would have been retired at this point. And I think, it was my feeling that once he got back into it and had this incredible experience on Shadow Moses, that he was kind of back in it. And, he had formed this bond with Otacon. And they, that's why I really took from the beginning of Metal Gear 2 was that he and Otacon had decided to start really getting back involved in the espionage world, and almost like a little detective agency, the two of them working together, and so for me, so for character wise, I just felt like he was reinvigorated. He was back to actively wanting to take part in these missions and had rediscovered his love of it. And so that's what I brought to the opening, or I tried to bring to the opening.
Was there, like, coming off the success of the first game, did you feel any sort of like added pressure, or did it influence any of your choices or the way you approached the character in the second game?
I don't know, not consciously, but I think to a certain extent, it was the first time I'd ever voiced something that had gone into a sequel. So there's a lot of thought about how to make it the same, how to make it a little different, what to put into it, and to not get overwhelmed by the success of the first game, to just sort of make it as true and gritty and grounded as hopefully we did in the first game. So that was my goal. But at the same time, like I said, I wanted to give it a little different flavor, and I felt like Snake has kind of got his mojo back. He's got his fire back for this work, and that makes it a little, gives it a little spice that the first game didn't have.
That's really cool. Let's jump forward to MGS3, and David, we'll start with you. In this game, you're actually playing a completely different character. You're playing
That's
Naked
right.
Snake / Big Boss. Yeah. So what were your early conversations like with Chris when you're creating this voice that's sort of similar, but it's a completely different character than Solid Snake?
Yeah, we didn't have conversations in the beginning. All of this stuff happens in the booth, and I think people don't realize that when you're hearing us say those lines, those are the first time we're reading them usually. Like, we're doing it straight off the page, and after Metal Gear 1, we never got the scripts in advance because it would have been too expensive to ship them probably. And yeah, so it's just, Chris and myself and the other actors, we're all trying to figure it out as we go. And the producers are saying, well, here's the deal. So we're in this time period, and now this is the guy that Solid Snake was cloned from. And they sort of, they just run it past you and go. So basically, I just asked where he was in his career and got a sense again of, so in the beginning of Metal Gear 3, he's like a young soldier. He's on fire with this job. He has learned from the boss. She's involved. So there's a lot of high emotions, but there isn't quite the same level of weight and history that Snake had in Metal Gear 1. This is actually the story. I started to get the feeling that this was the story that turned him into, it literally turns him into Big Boss. So he goes in believing one set of things and finds out that the world is not exactly the way he thought. And it's sort of his first encounter with betrayal and, well, getting his eye shot out and getting his arm busted and thrown off a bridge. And, you know, Snake really learns a lot. So coming into it at the beginning, I thought, you know, that's this character's most heroic. And I say this character, I know they're different characters, but at the same time, they're clones of each other, or one is a clone. And so they have this potential to be the same man, but their experiences shape them differently. So so basically it was to come in without quite the same weight of years and experience that Solid came into it in Metal Gear 1, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Chip, I know you didn't work on this game in particular, but is that pretty typical that like the voice actor comes into the booth, they may not have even read the script, they just kind of see it cold for the first time when they come in?
Most of the time, I would say that the vast majority of the time when we were doing voiceover sessions, either for this project or any other, the actors are getting the script for the first time when they walk in the room. On occasion, you know, if planning goes right and logistics all work out well, you'll get a script sent to us early enough and we can get it out to actors so they can get, you know, familiar with it. But that is, I would say, even today, it's, you know, maybe 30 or 40% of the time, as opposed to before when it was probably 10% of the time.
Okay, interesting. Tojima-san, on MGS3, this was the first game where you began working on the game right from the beginning of development. So how does Hideo typically share sort of like overall game direction to such a big team when he starts on a project?
Right. Yeah, great questions. So I think, you know, I had an experience to work for a couple of different studios, but like one of the best part to engage in the Hideo's project is he's really good to share the direction to the big team. So like he always kind of establishing at the very beginning of the project, he always tried to establishing one simple, clear thematic word. So what is a Metal Gear Solid 3? So Metal Gear Solid 3, the theme word was survival. It's simple enough, right? But it's very inspirational. For example, like Metal Gear Solid 4 was no place to hide. It was his first word. So it's very simple word, but it's very clear and very inspirational. So with adding some like a concept, visual concept art, and also he tried to establishing theme music in the very beginning of the production as well, because he want to share what kind of next Metal Gear he want to make it as clear as possible to the team as fast as possible. So and once we get a word like the Metal Gear Solid 3 is a survival. So game designer and art or music composer, sound designer, so everyone can start to thinking about what is the best audio, best sound design, best game design as survival game. So like for example, like a Metal Gear Solid 3, I think like previously, you know, game audio background is pretty much everything is music, actually, you know. So always like a stage 1 music, stage 2 music, you know. So Metal Gear Solid 1, 2 has some like a quiet moment, but still a lots of music. But like I believe like Metal Gear Solid 3 was it's much more like ambience driven audio we made it. Because the word survival, we wanted to make the player, bring player to you know, believable jungle, to feel the kind of survival adventure and ambiences, you know, kind of art and music and even like voice actors, everyone getting together to try to hitting the one conceptual word, survival, which is super fun and exciting and a very clear way for us to understand what is the goal for our next game. actually, so I believe like so I think so I was previously a composer, not like a AAA composer, but composer, one of the composer. And you know, like there are so many ways to compose the music. Like sometimes like just kind of composing music with playing guitar or playing a piano, or you know, just singing a song, or creating a music with a music logic, like lots of different way to compose the music. But like in my experience, so I believe the kind of one of the most successful way to compose the music is just imagine kind of you're walking in a park in a very sunny sky, really nice day. Sometimes kind of music just came to my mind, you know, that if that's happening, like so just kind of imagine like I'm standing on the live stage on the beach, and in front of me like thousands of audience. So I'm facing, and I'm kind of starting like playing the one guitar chord tone, like "Gang, everyone ready," you know, and like a gig is starting in my head. So and a kind of music melody is coming with you know, drum and bass and even strings, the full chorus. So sometimes music is just came to my mind. So it's happened sometimes in my life. Then after that, so my composition work is so easy, just kind of simulating the every guitar phrase and drums, beats, and vocals, everything to a sequence. That's it. Just kind of, you know, implementation. That's it. So then, you know, my story, pacing, everything is already completed in my head. So that is, to me, like a best, most successful way to making a great music. In my case, I think I feel the same on Kojima Hideo's game making. So I feel, so after a couple of months since kicking off the project, so I always feel the awesome, great game is already playing in his head with the audio and art and David Hayter's voice and Rika's music, everything. So it's always playing, and he's super excited already. So and no one else, anyone else, don't know why he's so excited. That's why like his role is just kind of sharing. So hey everyone, hey Rika, David, you know, even Chip, you know, so you know, so how cool game I'm playing in my head right now. So please make it. Please giving your power to make this really cool game in a real world. So then like the one word is survival, you know, so this one is survival. Rika, so this music is great, but little still different from my game, my music in my head, that kind of thing. So everything is something like that. He already has a very clear in his head. So, and to me, like my most important role is finding out what kind of audio he's playing in a cool way in his head. So it was very, sometimes very challenging, but it was very exciting and a fun job because we should have always some clear answer. And when each discipline hit his goal, so we are gonna making the one cohesive, great, powerful game. So sorry for that long story, but I just kind of wanted to share, you know, kind of how kind of he started to making the big production with a big project, which was very interesting and it was amazing to me.
That's an amazing story. David, before you have to go, I'll jump ahead to MGS4 real quick, just so we can ask you a question or two. So on this game, you play Snake, but Solid Snake has grown a lot. He's gotten a lot older between MGS2 and MGS4. He's developed, you know, back problems. His voice has changed. Maybe it's all the cigarettes or something. How did you approach sort of the voice of old Snake compared to Snake prior to then?
Well, remember, he's not that much older. He's gone through accelerated aging. So it's artificial. And so for Snake in Metal Gear 4, to himself, he's still 35 years old. But to everyone else, he looks like he's, 70. And so I didn't want it to be, a typical old man voice and that sort of thing. I felt it was more like a young man trying to speak through an older larynx, like his body it's the same voice, but his body is falling apart and he can't, and as the game went on, we did that one out of order. And I would ask what percentage of the game we were in to decide how desiccated he would sound. So at the beginning, he kind of sounds like this, and at the end, he's barely able to choke it out. And excuse me. So so that was very challenging, but it was really a matter of trying to create the voice of a young man who's drowning in an old man's body, which ironically is now happening to me. So I really managed to nail that. I'm just kidding. But that was the goal. It wasn't just to do an old man. It was to do a guy whose body is failing him, and inside his spirit is still strong. He still wants to fight and succeed and be as young as he was, but it's all falling apart. And I wanted the voice to reflect that. So that was the thinking behind that one.
I did want to ask you too, David. I imagine you're recording with this voice for several hours a day. Did this extra sort of gravelly voice put a strain on you? Like, was it difficult to speak in this voice for consecutive days or hours, long sessions?
Well, it was definitely the hardest of the games to do vocally, and where I said Metal Gear 1 had a script that was a foot and a half high. Metal Gear 4 took us, and Metal Gear 1 took us 10 days. Metal Gear 4 took us 9 months. So to give you an idea,
box. If you know those boxes where the where you buy a ream of, a box of paper, that's how much paper was for this game.
Yeah, it was something else. So, but at the same time, the Snake voice, I've been doing it for so long. People are like, doesn't that hurt your voice? And it's something I can do now without. It's sort of like a singing technique or just it's an acting technique. So I found a way to do it without harming my vocal cords, but it was definitely rougher to pull off. It didn't harm my voice, but it took a lot of effort.
Chris also mentioned that on this game, you no longer need to stay locked into visual timings for your performance, like stay locked into Japanese voice acting timing, things like that. Right, without those restrictions, did you feel like liberated or like you could do anything different with the performance?
Well, sort of. I mean, the timing is always similar. It was easier in that when you're going, Metal Gear 2, we recorded to the timing of the line, the Japanese line. And Japanese is a lot more complex than English. So it was weird to try to match, that's why anime sounds so strange sometimes, because they're trying to put English syllables into all of the multiple syllables that you'll have in the Japanese language. So for Metal Gear 4, we didn't have to do that. Where the computer could finally listen to what we were saying and just do it in English, do it in Japanese. So yeah, there was a little more freedom there. We didn't have to match the Japanese timing so much, which definitely made it easier. Yeah.
Last question for you, David, because I know you have to run. To you, what had Snake learned over his long journey through these games? He's been through so much, advanced aging with his clone technology. He'd seen all these experiences. Like, to you, what had Snake learned?
I think at the beginning of Metal Gear 1, he's alone and he's shut himself away in Alaska and he's put all the pain of his life behind him. And then in by Metal Gear 4, he's built this family for himself, and he's got Otacon and Meryl and Naomi, and he's learned to reintegrate himself with people. That's really the key to it. Is he's not he comes off as a hard-edged soldier, but really it's his heart that makes people attached to him, because he whatever the mission is, he's going to do what's right because he cares about the people. And I think at the beginning of Metal Gear 1, he was trying to shut himself away from that, and by the end of Metal Gear 4, he regrets that he's going to lose that, and he goes back to his ranch to die, essentially. So I think that's the journey. It was one last round of adventures for this legendary soldier, and in the end, he to be perfectly cheesy, he learned to love again.
Yeah, that's powerful to hear from you, David. Thank you, David, for your time, for coming to join tonight and all these incredible stories.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't realize it was an hour and a half. Rika, it's such a pleasure to see you always. And Chip, you're just a joy, and I love you to death. And Tojima-san, what an honor to hear you tell these stories. Your work is amazing. I'm sorry we've never met. I would love to buy you an Asahi sometime and get really drunk on Japanese beer.
Hey, David, before you go, can I tell a quick story about something that you did that I think that people out there would like to know about you?
Sure.
So there's a woman by the name of Amanda Mack, who you know very well, from Savannah. And she's just a fan of everything Metal Gear, and has asked, she, as a studio, when I ran the studio, she had asked me if I could reach out to some of the actors so that she can talk to them and be a part of an article she was writing, or a podcast that she was doing. I can't remember. And this went on for a while, and she had gotten to know a lot of the actors over the course of time. And at one point, she was coming into Los Angeles. She hadn't been to Los Angeles before, and she was going to come into Los Angeles, and it was her birthday, and we were going to show her around the studio, and we put her in front of the mic, and we had all this fun. And we were planning to go to dinner, and I called David, and I asked David whether or not he'd be willing to come over to dinner just to surprise her. And he, and his assistant said, no, he's a little busy. He can't come out to Hollywood to come and have dinner with a fan. But that's, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just, he was he's a busy man. And so Amanda and I and one or two other people were out to dinner. And in the middle of dinner, David walks into the restaurant and sits down next to Amanda and says, "Happy birthday." And it was, this woman just cried because David showed up. Because that was the kind of guy he is. He knew how important he was to her, how important Metal Gear was to her, and he just was a genuine good guy to just come over and say hi. And I just wanted to share that story because I've never forgotten it, and I'm sure she hasn't either.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go before Chip tells any more nice stories about me, because I don't want to cry in front of anybody. Thank you so much, guys. I'm so sorry I have to cut this short, but I know Rika and Chip and Tojima-san have more amazing stories for you. Thank you for having me, Eric. This was really an amazing experience.
Thank you, David. It was an honor. We really loved having you. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you,
David.
Be well. Oh, and by the way, all of you, you're pretty good.
Nice.
That was the great David Hayter. Jumping back to MGS3 for a moment, Rika, have to ask you about the musical shift in MGS3 and this sort of James Bond-like opening theme song. You created this song called Snake Eater, which was so striking and different than any of the music in this series prior to that point. How did you go about creating this song?
I did not create that song. That was actually wrote by Hibino-san, and I rearranged it and I produced it, and he wanted to sound like James Bond music. So I got, okay. So I hired an orchestrator and make it like a James Bond, big orchestra sound, and just the melody that he had, it's nothing like that. But I made it sound like James Bond music, and that was the whole concept of it. So that was it. So anything could happen by arranging music, original music, to something different, and put some more nuance to it, and something he they'll want to appreciate, later on, whatever. And he was successful.
That's
And
incredible and so inspirational that you're able to rearrange a song to be a completely different tone like that.
that's my job. So, and I get to rearrange different types of music, and I could pretty much write any type of music.
Well, let's move on to MGS4. Chip, this is where you came aboard the franchise officially. What interested you about working on these games in particular?
I'll say that, while I was working at Sound Deluxe, we had worked on some fairly large, pretty big titles like, God of War and Dead Space and Lost Planet, a few others. And EverQuest at that point was one of the larger, EverQuest 2 actually was one of the larger video games that we had worked on prior to this. And, MGS had already built up such a lore and so much history that it was actually terrifying to have this opportunity to, because Hideo had built up so much history with this project. And Chris came to us probably, I would probably say maybe 9 months-ish prior to us getting on this project. And I remember her coming in and saying, "Hey, I've got this project that I think I would like to bring over to you guys. I'm trying to work it out, but I'm not going to tell you what it is, because if it doesn't work out, I don't want you to be disappointed." And we're like, "Oh, okay, great, that's no problem." And so, she went back and she had whatever conversation she had with Hideo and Ryan and all the other people who were a part of making the final decisions to take it from where it was recording over to our studio. And then finally, one day, she came in and she said, "So are you guys available in like a couple of weeks? Because, we're going to have a team of people come in here from, Koji Pro to come in and meet you and see the studio, because they want to feel comfortable working and bringing Metal Gear Solid here." And I was like, "Sure, we'll be available. Sure, I can do anything you need. Whatever, we'll make it all happen for you. No problem." And so then she had arranged with some other people to come over, and Hideo came over. We had probably a 10-minute meeting with Hideo, and the rest of the time the team, he came in, if I remember correctly, he came in, went into the studio, had a private conversation, and then left. And then everyone else sat down with us and we told them what we could do for them. And a couple days later, she let me know that we were going to be working on Metal Gear. And I was like, "Oh, that's amazing. Great. Okay. We got to get started." And several months later, we brought, they came in with scripts and people, and and the thing is, we weren't very much on the creative side. We were logistics and scheduling, booking talent, making sure that everything went smoothly. But you're talking about talent who've been on this game for years, so we want to make sure that they're comfortable. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, what we're delivering is going to be exactly on par with what they've gotten before, if not better. And like, Tojima-san said, you're talking to a man who has got a very high bar, and I want to make sure that I'm meeting that bar or, exceeding it. And you might think a studio is a studio, but it's not. We want to make sure that we're recording well. We want to make sure that you've got the right talent in there. And there wasn't a lot of casting, but there was some. And Chris was involved, and there was a lot of back and forth with her to make sure that it all went smoothly. So yeah, there was to answer your question, there's a lot of pressure to make sure that you're meeting this, this goal and this bar, and you know, even as a studio just doing the logistics, you got to make sure it all goes perfectly.
It's incredible. I mean, I can only imagine the volume of lines and recordings over 7-9 months, whatever you mentioned. Tojima-san, I wanted to quickly go to you. I know your role expanded on this game. You had previously been in charge of cutscenes, but on MGS4, you became the audio director of the entire game. And this game takes place around the world, Metal Gear Solid 4. And I've heard stories about your team traveling around the world to scout locations, and that you woke up at crazy hours in places like Morocco to record sounds. What kind of sounds did you capture there, and what was your process like recording on location?
Yeah, for so Kojima production, so pretty often having like a field trip to research something as a whole team, not only audio team, like a audio art and even like a game designer, and of course Hideo, and even like a story team together, and just to kind of feel the culture or ambience or nature of the each locations. Like a Metal Gear Solid 4, I think Kojima production had a Morocco trip and a Peru, Machu Picchu trip, and also Prague trips. And that's why like Metal Gear Solid 4 has like a 3 different locations. And an audio team, so we made the audio team separated to and having a couple of engineers for each locations. And I took a Morocco part, and so bringing a recorders, and took a bunch of sounds, like live sounds, and I even some kind of religious mood sound in Morocco. It's a strong religious country, and a window sound, and more like chickens and flies, insect, and humans were a lot. But like I think the most kind of unique things I recorded it and I learned in Morocco was actually the very unique reverberation. It was a kind of like old like maze city. So I visited to a city which called Fez, which is a completely maze, like lots of like a small street, and lots of like stores is just standing both sides of the very narrow street, and like endless maze. It was really unique geometry, and so always never stop the reflection, like people's voices, or kind of even like a jet sounds, or not so many cars noises, because car cannot drive in such a kind of narrow street, but like chickens voices, or kind of, so everything is so reflected. So so I kind of recorded a bunch of like a reverb sample, and I kind of tried to simulate it to making the sense of reverberation. So obviously I couldn't record the gun sound or explosions in the trip because it didn't happen. But I tried to simulate how the explosion sound should be with this town and the city's location in a real world. So, and I tried to bloat the sense of like cities with unique reverberation, both for cinematic and in-game in a Metal Gear Solid 4. I remember that as really good and interesting chart for me.
Incredible. I know we're running up against it. If any of you have to run, please let me know, and that's totally okay. I wanted to try to squeeze in a couple audience questions, if that's all right. Joanna asks a question for Tojima-san. I'm a Foley artist working in AAA games at Sony. Metal Gear Solid is one of the first games I've seen where the sound of footsteps are a huge part of game design. What are your feelings on the current state of Foley, and do you like current generation games? do you feel like current generation games have lost the opportunity to deploy Foley performances as part of the game design?
Yeah, it's thanks for the question, and really great question. So I think it depends on game. I think the most kind of exciting and even like the easiest part for me to work on the Metal Gear Solid audio was actually, it was sneaking game. So once combat happening, so mixing is gonna be messier and busier so easily. But usually Metal Gear Solid is a sneaking game. So actually game design wise, player can finish the whole game without any kills. That's the concept of the Metal Gear Solid. So usually, people need to kill the kind of hundreds of enemies to clear the game, but like technically every Metal Gear Solid title can finish it without any kill, which means there's a kind of like a quiet space to play the nice ambient or a very detailed Foley. There is a quite kind of free space to make the details sound like Foley. So like compared to it, so for example, like right now, so I'm working on the Halo, so which is really busy shooter game, and it's people never stop to firing guns. And the main character, Master Chief, has a very strong health bar. He's a super soldier Spartan. So he never died with getting a 30 shot of the small enemy characters, which means player and enemy never stop to firing the guns. So always like a 5-6 gun sound is played with a bullet buy and bullet impact and explosion. It's so many sounds. So then I think Foley, especially around the character movement sound, is so important for me to make it live. But it's actually very challenging to have such a important, my favorite sound to live in a very busy mix. So definitely I'm trying to, kind of make it still work, because I believe Foley sound is super, super important to make it like believable and a more kind of emotional in a gameplay experience. That's why, so we are trying to make it still work through the kind of new dynamic mixing system, that kind of things. But definitely, kind of CPU is faster, memory is bigger, which means character and weapons, everything like quantity is getting increased right now. That's why, so like prioritize is super important right now, and mixing itself is so much harder now than before, actually. So hope it was answering to your question. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, we have a question from Kevin for both Muranaka-san and Tojima-san. Have you noticed any differences in how Japanese and American or international audience have enjoyed your work? Metal Gear says so much about American politics, military, and culture, but from a Japanese perspective, so many moments, big and small, in games play differently depending on where a player is from. Rika, would you like to answer that first?
Well, I only understand American side because I lived in the LA when I was making Metal Gear Solid series. So only time I was going to Japan to Tokyo game show. That was it. But that's the only time I get to understand Japanese players, and the difference between American players and Japanese players. I think American players, they actually had experience going to the war, Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan, or a lot of people actually experienced war. So they understand, and they understand the game more, or they get attached to emotionally. Other than, Japanese people, I guess, never want to work. And my generation or younger generation, they're more, they're really peace oriented in Japan. So they never experience gunshot or gun shooting, anything like that. And so, like, in America, there's a lot of violence in the city. So it's like, it's real, you know. So I think American players are better playing the Metal Gear Solid game than Metal Gear Solid game in Japan. Japanese fans are, I think, is better in America. That's what I heard.
That's interesting.
Game players.
How about for you, Tojima-san? Have you noticed differences in how the audiences react to your work?
I'm not sure. It's kind of, but for example, like what I'm feeling it is like, so especially kind of we get a kind of ton of like feedback from both like Japanese and US users fans. But like I got a much more, and especially for Metal Gear Solid users, is very warm. So the funds helped the production a lot, very kind of in a very positive manner. Not everything, but like so many kind of positive, encouraging message we get it. So which always encouraging us to move us forward. And I get a kind of lots of like comments around like character or story or music or art in Japan. So instead, so I feel like we get a much more feedback around the gameplay and game design from US side, especially kind of shooter. I always feel so American fan is really care about how fun the game experience is. For example, like consistent feedback we get it, especially for Metal Gear Solid 4 was cinematic is too long. And a Japanese fan, some fans say like my best part is cinematic because story is very interesting. It looks like movie, but it's clearly breaking the balance to playing the game purely. The point was I always feel interesting, like even working for Halo, so it was a really important learning opportunity for me to know, kind of how important gameplay itself is for American game players. Definitely, it's not like a black and white things. So it's a lot of, similarity there, but this is the only things I'm sometimes feel it a little different.
That's really interesting. We have a question from Space Cowboy for Chip. With one Metal Gear Solid game under your belt, how did it feel moving into Metal Gear Solid 5 at the time, especially just with any challenges from the voiceover production side?
So, once we had really worked with Chris and the team for, over a year on working on Metal Gear Solid 4, we kind of got a shorthand worked out. We knew everybody on the team. We knew a lot of the actors. And I'll tell you, coming out of with the project coming to us for the first time for MGS4, all of the actors had already had rates already established, and they were kind of, we were moving into what I think was our studio was a little bit more of a Hollywood studio, and they were trying to have their rates increased. And we're also dealing with, Konami, who's got a very clear budget of what they want to spend. So there's a balance there of making sure that your actors are fairly compensated, especially with the ones who have been on the project for a long time and they're actually looking for an increase in their rates because they've brought these characters to life. And then you've also got a company that has been hiring these actors over and over again. You've got a very steady rate that they've been paying, and that's kind of what's in their head. So my job is to kind of keep that balance. But when you're going from 4 to 5, we'd already established relationships with those agents, with those actors, and we've established a relationship with all the creatives. And to be able to have a conversation and say, hey, look, this actor's been with you for a long time. Maybe it's time to give them a little bit of a raise. Or maybe, it's easier for us to say, all right, well, are you going to use them this time? How much are you going to use them that time? We had a lot more information a year later than we did going into 4. Going into 5, there was just so much more information, so much more shorthand that we were able to make going into 5 that much easier. Although, and I think I know Space Cowboy is, I saw part of your question, and yeah, there was definitely an issue with having to switch out our main character. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do on this franchise, was having that phone call. But that said, just in general, going from 4 to 5 is fairly easy. The volume of work was up there and a lot, but working with the team, working with the actors, fantastic all around.
That's really interesting. About the challenges with rates and people who've been on the franchise for a long time. I hadn't considered that. We have a question for Tojima-san. On Metal Gear Solid 4, were any real firearms used or recorded for that game?
Fire alarm? Yeah, sorry, I don't recall clearly. But yeah, so I could be wrong, but in Kojima production, typically we liked to making the alarm type of sound through synthesizer rather than record it or using a library. So we might make a kind of unique alarm sound through synthesizer, but sorry, not 100% clear.
Yeah, no problem. I know it's been a very long time.
Yeah,
since
it's
these
hard
games.
to recall.
Rika, we have a question about Metal Gear Solid 2.
Okay.
When you were making that Can't Say Goodbye to Yesterday song, were there any other songs or ideas in consideration for that main song, or was that the only idea from the beginning for a song?
I think there was only music I wrote for Hideo that time, because he said jazz, and of course, everybody that I am a jazz pianist. So for me, it was just easy. I just wrote it, and I just wrote it 5 minutes, and that was it, and that's it. But
Beautiful
to find
song.
a singer was hard, and to mix was hard, and that's it. But that was just one song.
That's true. Yeah, you had all the other Harry Gregson Williams songs to oversee with that game as well. We have another question for Chip from Joshua. Did you work with the localization team in tandem for these games?
So I answered him in the chat because I figured I would just help you out. But the answer is no. Actually, that was done separately. We didn't work on the localization for that.
Okay, great. All right, so one final audience question. This will be for each of you to answer. This is a question also from Space Cowboy. What advice would you give to people who are looking to step into the game audio industry? Are there any steps that we can do to expand our skill set to become more employable, and any other practices we can do to develop sound design and Foley skills and what have you? Tojima-san, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, definitely great question. And industry and even a hiring process has been changed since I joined in the industry. And also like America and Japan has a different way to hire a person. But like I guess like thinking about the current era, I think the most kind of beneficial part for the student to try to getting a position in the games industry is actually so you can making the audio and you can putting an audio to the actual video game in your PC with using the exact same professional tools in your house. So like audio middleware, like which calls WISE, both Kojima Production and 3-4 Industry is using. You can download it for free to try to use it. So right now, and you can definitely record the sound effects source. If it's not affordable, you don't need to purchase a very expensive microphone and recorder yet. So even like iPhone microphone, pretty good to try it. So just kind of record it to try to finding anything cool sound and try to making music even with a lower production, it's fine. So just kind of I think I would recommend you to make actual game audio, part of actual game audio using a professional tools, which you can do it right now with using exact same tools as us. And just kind of one only kind of, my recommendation is like what I learned from Kojima. After you get used to, basic tools, tools, behavior, and the system itself, try to setting your goal bar much higher, much higher. So you might feel, yeah, so it's pretty good because I'm student. Some people might feel it, so it's pretty good. My audio is better than like my friend, a little bit better, that kind of things. But so that is exactly what I was thinking when I started to work for the Metal Gear Solid 2 project as a first time, and it didn't work. So, and kind of before Metal Gear Solid 2 and after Metal Gear Solid 2, so my career different is only, 1 year, only 1 year. So which means like my skill set is growed. It's getting better, but it's just kind of 1 year's difference. But huge difference between before and after is setting my goal bar really high. So which means like before Metal Gear Solid, so Metal Gear Solid 2, I compare my audio quality to my friends. But after Metal Gear Solid 2, I always compare, my audio to world best quality, even like a movie audio like Matrix. So I couldn't hit the Matrix quality in a Metal Gear Solid 2, but my quality, I made it in Metal Gear Solid 2 was much higher than I could make it without the motivation. So whenever you try to recording a sound or composing music and try to put it something in game, please try to compare to Death Stranding or Metal Gears or even Halo, and try to make your sound even higher. Then so with this kind of learning, so I don't think it's going to be too difficult to finding a position somewhere in our industry because we are always looking for very passionate audio workers. So good luck.
That's a really great advice, Tojima-san. Rika, what would you advise? Like if someone were to ask you advice, how would you advise someone to begin looking for work in the audio industry in terms of music for you? What would you suggest to someone who's just starting their career and wants to work in games as a composer or musician of some sort?
everything changed over the years, so I don't even know the process right now. Well, to hire composer for the music for the video game, because now you can't go to the video game company direct like I did. You know, I just like before when I want to get the record deal, I call the record company. I want a record deal. You know, nobody does that anymore. This is a back then. It's like I want to get a job at the video game company. Well, how I got a job at this Kojima Productions at Konami, I actually look at the Kibo magazine, Nikkei, Sankei newspaper, like Wall Street, and they had an ad say, video game composer wanted, audio engineer wanted, and like they had this description of how many people they want to hire at the video game company. So I wrote the resume and I actually applied. That's how I got a job. But now it's totally different. So I don't even know how to begin to advise the people. Just be efficient and just know what you want to do. With you have a clear mind, clear vision of your music. If somebody asks you to write music for, let's say, Metal Gear Solid 5, and he'll tell you just write music for this scene. So you think about it, you write it, you know, and you do whatever you can to write the music. And I don't know any other way. You know, you just have to do your best. That's it. But nowadays, I don't even know how to get a job at the video game company. You know, maybe I'm just too old. I have no idea. I'm just being real.
No, it's totally fair. The game has changed. The industry has changed so much, I imagine.
Yeah.
Chip, for you, Chip, in your department, if someone wanted to be, let's say, an engineer for voice recording sessions or a dialogue editor, what would you recommend to them as they're stepping into their careers, trying to get work in that for games?
Well, a lot of it is training, going to school, understanding exactly what the role is that you're trying to do. If you're trying to be an engineer or an editor, it's practice, practice, practice. It's about going out and just like same thing with an actor also. You don't just say, I want to be an actor and all of a sudden you're an actor. You have to practice your craft. If you're an athlete, you have to continually do the thing that you're trying to do and get better and proficient at it. And a lot of it, and I hate to say it, but a lot of this business is it's about who you know. Reach out to your contacts and say, hey, give me an opportunity and let me show you what I can do. After you've done all of those other things, after you've become proficient at your task. You don't want to just be like, hey, I'm an editor, give me a job. So it's much more about making sure that you're going after what you want, being good at what the job is that you want, and then reaching out to the contacts that going out to LinkedIn and talk to people at game companies if you want to be in a game company. If you're an actor, same thing. It's taking classes. Voice acting is primarily acting. So you go out and take classes. It's a specialized form of acting, but it's still a job in itself. There's a lot of rejection with it, and that's as with every job. But you also want to make sure that you're practicing it each and every day, even if you're not getting the job and you're not seeing the opportunities right in front of you. You still have to practice, 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 just like an athlete. And then when you're done and you've gotten yourself to a point where you're very, very good, then you go out and you can start talking to people about getting into those positions. But I'd like to answer the question a little differently as well, from the standpoint of the people who might be in this room. If you're a person who's hiring for a role, going about hiring the same way each and every time, especially over the course of the last several years, if you're always looking through the same channels to find the talent, you're not going to find anybody different. They're all there, and you can always find the same people in the same place. What I'm asking you to do is, if you are in a position of hiring, is to look outside of your comfort zone, go to other places where there are underrepresented people, where you have the opportunity to get very, very good talent, experienced talent, and allow them an opportunity to get into this field. What's frustrating is, and I would say from the job that I currently have, is to see job postings that say, hey, we're looking for a sound editor, hey, we're looking for an engineer, we're looking for this or that, must have shipped 15 AAA titles. Okay, well, how are the people who are underrepresented ever going to be able to ever get into that? Because they don't get the opportunities in the first place. And I'm not just talking about big game companies, but even smaller game companies who are looking for experienced people. You have to kind of open up your doors a little bit more and allow everybody to get in. And it doesn't even have to just be underrepresented people, just other people than the people that you normally go to. That's how the industry grows. That's how it becomes more diverse and inclusive. And I think that's probably where we're going to find our greatest growth in this industry. It's getting there. It's getting better. We're seeing a lot more women in the industry these days who are in leadership roles. Amy Hennig, is one of my favorite people who is fantastic in this industry, and I love her to death. And she's only one of a handful. My partner in my business, Julia Bianco Scheffling, she's wonderful. But I want to make sure that we're always looking and continuing to look outside of what makes us comfortable, outside of the things that we've been doing for the last 20 years. That's how the industry grows. And that's all I want to say.
It's, yeah, I mean, absolutely true and profound advice, not just for people trying to get into the industry, but people who are hiring those who are trying to break in. Chip, thank you for that. Just in closing, I just wanted to of course, thank you all, but also say the history of storytelling in video games really cannot be told without the incredible work of all of you. These Metal Gear Solid games challenged everyone to be better storytellers and more strongly connect characters with the audience. So absolutely remarkable work over such a long period of time. Really, really inspiring work. And thank you all so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. We'll have more MPSE sound advice events. Please stay tuned to our Facebook page, Motion Picture Sound Editors on Facebook. Thank you again, everyone. Appreciate you all coming.